Is Christianity the white man's religion? Or is it exclusively the black man's religion? See, both these claims are increasing at the exact same time in the black community, which means somebody's not studying.
If what we saying is true, then it changes everything.
These contradictory statements are evidence that the black community is searching for an identity. We want to connect to our ancestors. We want a heritage we could be proud of. See, we're sick of these injustices that keep plaguing our community. We're sick of unarmed black men being gunned down by the police. We're sick of our water being poisoned. We're sick of our school systems being the worst schools in the city. So a lot of us get angry, rightly so. We begin to proclaim we don't need the white man. They don't care about us. We're better than them. But we're unaware that racism is the very disease that we are fighting against. Can a disease cure the disease? Or does it just make everybody sick? Will the rejection of the white man's religion really make us who we really are? Or making a religion exclusively ours give us a true identity? You may come from an infamous neighborhood, but is that your sole identity? Should people judge you and say, you could take them out the hood, but you can't take the hood out of them? Should they say, oh, you're from North City, you can't go to an Ivy League school? You see, descent is important, but it is much more to a person than where they come from. So we must not let where we come from dictate what we can do and who we are.
Grew up in North St. Louis, engulfed in the drug and gang culture of the city back in the 90s. At 19, I was incarcerated for second-degree murder, 3 first-degree assaults on police officers, and 4 armed criminal actions. That was life-changing, but that wasn't what was the life-changing event that happened. The life-changing event that happened while I was incarcerated was a preacher who used to come into the jail cell, and we were on what is called a tier. He would come telling us about Jesus. Well, at this point in my life, I had been to church when I was a kid, but I gathered what I thought was information about Jesus, and that is that he was white man's Jesus, and that Christianity was the white man's religion, and that the Bible was a book written by the white man. So literally, when this preacher, older black gentleman, would come in and try to talk to people about Jesus, I would mumble certain things. I would talk to guys on the side and accuse them of not being sincere. I said, if you were on the street, you wouldn't read the Bible. Why you want to come in here and try to read the Bible?
A Catholic man holds his rosary. Islam holds the Quran. While dudes on the streets trying to hold on to time. While Buddhists look for peace, Hindus and Sikhs. The truth.
In the summer, when your skin gets darker, does your identity change? Or in the winter, when you get lighter, does that make you more white? What about white people who get really, really tan? Does that make them black? What about people from India? Many of them darker than African American people. Should their religion change based on their skin color? See, our skin color is produced by melanin. Melanin is not spiritual whatsoever. So how can the color of my skin determine what my religion should be?
You know, the reason that I was incarcerated is relevant to kind of the cultural crisis, the police and African American men being shot and killed. I was locked up for, I think I stated it, but second-degree murder, 3 first-degree assaults on police officers, and 4 armed criminal actions. And at that point in my life, I was on about a 5-year run of just drug selling, gang activity, and just run-ins with the police. And there was one particular detective who told me he made a promise, and I made a promise. He said that he promised that if I ever ran from him, that he would say I had a gun, and I threatened his life, and I promised him that I never ran and never will. Well, he stayed true to his, and I didn't stay true to mine, because I did run, and he did bring those charges against me. And there was a situation where me and a friend actually got into somewhat of a chase. They were chasing us. I believe that they saw what was about to be a confrontation with some guys who were our enemies. It was a confrontation we were having, somewhat of a mini war going on in our neighborhood with some guys, and we saw them. We were in a car, they were walking, but I was going to do something to them, but they ran, and so. But I think those police, it was actually 3 detectives, they saw it and they came behind us in pursuit. And I drove away, and I drove into a dead end. And I ran out of the driver's side of the car. My friend ran the passenger side. And as we hit the doors, because we both hit the doors at the same time, bullets just rang out. They began to unload. And I don't know if you ever heard bullets whistle past, but I had been shot twice before, and I had been shot at numerous times. So I was almost bracing myself as I was running and hopping the fence, bracing myself to be hit, because I could hear those bullets just whistling past. And my assumption was I did get away, I wasn't shot. My assumption was my friend got away, but come to find out that he was shot and killed, but shot about 9 times, just riddled with bullets, 7 in the back, 2 in the back of the head. And so that was a situation where it was a part of the narrative of my life, and the reason why I was so angry while I was in jail and talking bad about Jesus, I was just ready for any confrontation, particularly with what I saw was just the white man, this narrative that I just took it and ran with it. You know, I got kicked out of a school in a suburb here called Clayton, high-end suburb, and you know, and again, I'm blaming the white man that they're doing this to me, but I'm not taking responsibility for my actions. So I'm blaming them, and so it spilled over into what I had heard about the faith, about religion, that it's a white man's religion.
For a minute,
We just talking.
they say the white man Jesus
Hoodwinked.
got the black man deceived.
Bamboozled.
I can hear him now in the prison.
Run them up.
So should we all just go back to our roots? Figuratively, because literally means getting on a plane. And we don't like planes. See, I see people with traditional African dress, with symbols and pictures on their Facebooks, who hardly know a thing about Africa. Many of them don't even want to go, talking about it's too many bugs. Frankly, some of y'all obsessed with Africa would not even make it there. See, I find it interesting that many of us have been told go back to Africa, and we've listened. Well, mentally, but not physically, because of the bugs. Remember, your identity is more than where you are from or where you descended from. Most of us were born in the US, and we can't change that. So what about culture? While culture is beautifully distinct, it is not decided by skin color or ethnicity. Culture is defined by the Merriam-Webster as the beliefs, customs, and arts of a particular group or society of a place in time. Many definitions of culture do not mention color of skin or ethnicity at all, nor should it, because it gives credence to thoughts like all black people are violent, all black people like Medea and empire. We have to be careful when we say things like Christianity is the white man's religion. Why? Because there are black Christians all around the world, including Africa. We are adopting a view of black people that does not originate from Africa but is actually disrespectful to many of the people living there.
What happened is that I got into a fight about something. I don't even remember. It was stupid. I got into a fight. I went to the hole, which is an isolated place, and nobody can visit you in the hole. But lo and behold, after a couple months, that old preacher came to the hole to visit me and asked me to do him a favor. And I was touched by the fact that he would come and visit me. I hadn't had any contact with nobody really in that isolated place, and he just came to see me, and that touched me, and he asked me to do him a favor, and that was to read the Bible, read a portion of the Bible in the Psalms. I didn't know nothing about what the Psalms were. He said, read Psalm 51 3 times a day for the rest of the week.
They telling me to free us from our lower selves. The yin and yang. They say we need to know ourselves. Your heritage. They didn't teach us how to understand. Not in school.
A view of culture that tells black people what is for them and what is not for them has been used against us often. The water fountain is not for you. That school is not for you. Sit in the back of the bus. You like country, you can't be black. No, but for real though, why would you like country? But anyway, lastly, you're black, you can't be Christian. It's not your religion. I guess white people get all the best things, including religion. See, the slave mentality exists amongst those who let society tell them what belongs to them. People who say things like Christianity is the white man's religion, or call people house niggas or Europeanized, should not claim to be woke or black conscious. You are accepting and perpetuating the very box you claim to be out of. Black people have been told what is theirs and what is not for far too long.
So day 3, as I'm reading it, it's like a light bulb comes in my head, and these things make so much sense. It's so relevant to my life. When he says, against you, I have sinned and done evil in your sight. I literally just thought about all the evil and all the things that I did. Before, it was all about the fact that I'm in this situation and I really didn't do nothing. This is an injustice, but when I was confronted with the reality of against you, it says against you and you only have I done evil in your sight. I just thought about all the sex, the drug dealing, the gun toting, the shooting. And I was like, man. And then that verse also says he would have been just to judge me.
We use their books. They only taught us how to understand. That's all they taught us. Ever since they took us from the motherland. Islam holds the Quran, while dudes on the streets trying to hold on to time.
Words like woke can imply a secret knowledge or superiority that can make us look down on others. It's reminiscent of the rivalry between field slaves and house slaves. It took away from the fact that they both were slaves. Calling each other house niggas, Europeanized, or brainwashed is choosing to remain in the old slave mentality. The more we fight each other, the less we fight injustice. By the way, when you call somebody a house slave, does that make you a field slave? Or when you call somebody Europeanized, are you calling them that in English, a language native to England?
Christianity deals with the core issue of life for people, that is their sins, and their sins are against God, who is a creator, who is a loving God, but he's also the judge. And I was confronted with that reality, and that is a part of the central message of the gospel. And so all of that I didn't know then, but it really profoundly changed my outlook on my situation of being incarcerated. It changed my outlook on people. It really changed my worldview.
I get it. Jesus didn't have blue eyes, blind hair, but sheep wool skin bronze like mine. He say that's what the text say. I say, oh, we using the Bible? Oh, okay.
What about those who make it exclusive to black people? I wish the people who reject Christianity because it was used in racist ways could sit down with some of these people who believe everyone who is not black cannot be saved. Many of these groups say the exact same thing the KKK says. If you ask them about Revelation 7:9, words about every tongue and nation worshiping Jesus, some will respond that those who are not of Hebrew descent are slaves. Anyone who uses the Bible to puff up their race and make themselves superior deeply understand the mentality of the racist Christians who enslaved our ancestors. If you ever wonder how the slave masters perverted the Bible to keep people enslaved, there are plenty of black racists claiming to be Christian or Israelites. You can ask how they did it. Jesus is someone to desire, but his skin color has nothing to do with his ability to do what he said he would.
The reality is that the core issue for me was that I was angry. I had hate. And the message of the gospel is a message of God's love that permeates a hard heart, a heart that is loveless, and a heart that really, I could say is not loving a white man or not loving another gang person, but really my hatred is towards God, the Creator. And that's why I love that Psalm 51. It says, against you and you only have I sinned. Obviously, I sinned against a lot of people, but the reality is that all sin is against God and we're enemies of God. And I understand that now. I didn't understand that then, but what the gospel did for me was, as it says in the scriptures, takes the stony heart out, give you a heart of flesh, a tender heart that can love God, and go all the way to loving your enemies. Although the white man is not my enemy, but that hatred was drove out by love. And again, I began to see the world, see people, see everything in a different light. And it started with me taking responsibility for my sin, and my need for mercy.
Is so vital. You're making reference to Revelation in chapter 1, verses 14 and following. The Apostle John gave a description of his vision of Jesus the Son. Them characteristics represented judgment to come.
We have to ask, if Jesus was not historically pictured as white, would we fight so hard over his ethnicity? If he was always pictured as black and nothing changed historically, would it still be the white man's religion? If he was born in Africa and nothing changed about our story, would Christianity still be the white man's? The ironic thing is that he was born neither in Europe nor Africa, but yet we still make it a European or African thing. If anything, it should be a Middle Eastern religion. What this shows is that we are not following history or the Bible, but we are being guided by an American narrative. Our history as slaves, the injustices we have faced, and our lack of identity must not blind us so much that we have to deny or accept a religion based on it. The interesting thing about Christianity is that it is growing the fastest amongst non-white ethnic groups. Do they know that they're following the exclusive black or white religion? No, because they're not looking at it through our cultural narrative. So looking at the Christian religion and its truth, the skin color of Jesus and his followers should be left out of the decision. One question you should ask, does it deliver on its promises?
As I was faced with some of the challenges of my old ways of life, I knew as a Christian, quote unquote, which is what I believed I was, that I needed to go to a church. And this was my first time going into a church in a long time, and my first time going into the church since I'd been out, with my newfound perspective on the world and life. And this preacher, they had a guest preacher, and he said something. He was up there, and it was all, it was very theatrical, and I was like, now I credit it both to my heart. I was leaning now more back towards my own ways, but it was just something about the way he was speaking, and I use the word authentic now, but it just didn't really seem authentic to me. But this really, the straw that broke the camel's back was when he made a general reference. He said, if there's anybody in here who knows somebody that needs God, that is in a situation that they need God, if you know somebody in your family or friend, then come up to the front and give $50. And I was like, wow. I was like, this is not cool. And that was pretty much my justification for not going to church and kind of going back out to the world and wilding out. I mean, I literally started back selling drugs and everything, but I would go home at night after a day of doing everything that I knew that was wrong against my conscience. I would go home and just weep. I would weep. So, though I went to church, and it was something real. It was something beyond just that church. It was God who really was, I'll say now, wooing me and really had a grip on my life, that eventually, after a couple of years, got out when I was 21, 23, I went through that period for about 2 years, 23, a week before my 24th birthday, is when so many things began to happen in I was just literally at a place where either I was going to, felt anyway, that either I was going back to jail or I was going to get killed. And then the only other option was to surrender my whole life.
To come and other things, but it wasn't describing his race. In that case, he literally has fire in his face. So we cannot isolate verses and make them say what we want. Warnings of that are on the last page in that same book. While dudes on the streets trying to hold on to time, while Buddhists look for peace, Hindus and Sikhs, the truth is absolute. That's why.
Before we go into the history of Christianity in Africa, those of you who've seen the documentary saying Christianity is the white man's religion, I want to ask if the narrative was about Christianity's crimes against black people, or conspiracy. They don't want you to know, but somehow the person who made the documentary found out anyway. Is it reactionary? Meaning, if the narrative of African slaves was not present, would they still draw the same conclusions? We have to be careful that we are not accepting information based on how we feel. A simple look at the history of Christianity in Africa and some of our heroes paints a very different picture than many of these documentaries. In addition, many believe that Islam is the true black man's religion. I will address this belief also. I want to encourage you to fact check everything you hear. Many of you heard that Christianity is the white man's religion, that white men brought Christianity to Africa in the 14 through 1700s during the transatlantic slave trade. This is simply not true. In Acts chapter 8, there is a historical account of the Ethiopian church through the Ethiopian eunuch. Acts is a historical book in the Bible about the acts or doings of the early church after Jesus' death. Acts was written by Luke, a physician who knew the Apostle Paul, but also traveled with him. Biblical scholars believe Acts was written as early as 60 AD and no later than 70 AD. To give context, that is 500 years before Islam's major prophet Muhammad was born and approximately 600 years before Islam would ever reach Africa. Twice the period of time from now and the signing of Declaration of Independence. It has not been 600 years since Columbus landed in the Americas. Think about how long that is. Acts details this African's conversion and states that he was the official of the Ethiopian Queen Candake, also known as Candace. Candake or Cantake was a title for queens and mothers of queens in the ancient African kingdom of Kush, also known as Nubia and Ethiopia. The Ethiopian, also known as Aksum king, Ezna converted to Christianity around the year 300 AD and made it the official state religion. While King Ezna made it the state religion in the 4th century, many Ethiopians believe Christianity came to Ethiopia far earlier than the 300s, but it had been there since the Ethiopian eunuch's conversion. This is what Ethiopian Christians believe. African people. In fact, a large Christian presence can be seen in Africa for 1700 years. Armenia in the Middle East and Ethiopia in Africa are first and second on the list for official Christian nations. When Christianity was made the official religion by King Ezna, Islam's prophet Muhammad would not be born for another 200 to 240 years, and Islam would not reach Africa for another 300 years. Think about this. It was not until 2016 that our country turned 240 years old. The transatlantic slave trade that brought our ancestors to this country and is believed by many the time when Africans or Africa was forced to become Christian would not begin for another 1,000 years. John S. Mbidi, an African priest in Kenya, stated that Christianity is so old in Africa it can be rightly described as an indigenous traditional African religion. In the 1800s, European scholar Theodore Musum, who received the Nobel Peace Prize in 1902, stated that through Africa, Christianity became the religion of the world. In fact, nearly half of the church's most prominent leaders through the first few centuries were North African, including Origen, who lived in Alexandria and is believed to be one of the greatest biblical scholars of his time. Cyprian, who was a bishop of Carthage and would be eventually killed because of his faith. Athanasius, who was bishop of Alexandria for 45 years and was exiled or forced to leave his city 5 times by 4 different emperors. And the most famous is Augustine, born of Hippo, which is modern-day Algeria. He would become a bishop and was known for urging people to release their slaves as an act of piety. However, if you look up these men's pictures, many times they will be depicted as white. Why? Probably because the people painting the pictures may have never seen a brown or black person before, or there were politics involved, or they wanted to have an ethnocentric view of their religion. Those who claim it is only the black man's religion or black people have to have a certain religion not to be Europeanized understand their motives well. Nonetheless, it is foolish to deny or accept a religion based on paintings. However, in the early days of Christianity, they did not have the concept of race we have today. Dr. John Perkins, a civil rights activist, community developer, minister, and recipient of 13 honorary doctorates, believes that race is an invention used for economic purposes. If you make them not human, you can kill them, you can enslave them, you can beat them. In fact, Father Moses the Black, as they called him, has memorials and shrines in many European Catholic churches and was even named an official saint. He is pictured as black, as his name suggests, and he was from Ethiopia. Born in 330 AD and died of martyrdom in 405 AD. Still, that was 165 years before Muhammad was born. So why is the myth that Christianity is the white man's religion so prevalent? One reason is while Christianity has strong roots in Egypt, Nubia, and Ethiopia far earlier than any northern European country, they did not work to bring the message to the rest of Africa and were largely inward focused. So although Africa had Christians in it for hundreds of years before Europe would fully accept Christianity, many West Africans first heard of Christianity from Europeans. Still, it is believed that it was not until Augustine of Canterbury, probably named after Augustine of Hippo, went as a missionary in 597 AD to England that they began to fully accept Christianity. Christianity had been made the official religion of Ethiopia for approximately 250 years by that point. If African countries had spread the gospel to other countries, no one would dare say that Christianity is the white man's religion. It is simply a lie. In fact, more of the Bible takes place in North Africa than in Europe, and countries like England, Germany, and France don't appear in the Bible at all. So is it true that our ancestors were forced to convert? I'm sure in many cases they were, but many times Christianity was kept from the slaves. Take Nat Turner, for example. He led what he believed was a God-ordained slave revolt. As a man of faith and the Bible, the initial reaction of the slave owners was to forbid the evangelization and education of slaves. If slave owners hoped that Christianity would aid them in their evil ways, their plan backfired. Why? Because it is the story of God rescuing the Jews from slavery, Moses. Because it talks about a homeless, despised Jew who helped the poor, ill, and helpless. It is a very dangerous thing to give the oppressed hope, which is what Christianity did for many slaves. Phyllis Wheatley, a black poet who was brought over from Africa on a slave ship, wrote, "'Twas mercy that brought me from my pagan land, taught my benighted soul to understand that there is a God and a Savior too. Once redemption I neither sought nor knew. Some view our sable race with a scornful eye. Their color is a diabolic dye. Remember, Christians, Negroes, black as Cain, may be refined and join the angelic train." In this, she expressed thankfulness to God for showing himself to her, but at the same time, she challenged the sin of her captors. Abolitionists will go on to use her poems to prove that black people were intelligent human beings. Frederick Douglass said, "What I have said respecting and against religion, I mean strictly to apply to the slave-holding religion of this land, with no possible reference to Christianity proper. For between Christianity of this land and the Christianity of Christ, I recognize the widest possible difference. I love the pure, peaceable, and impartial Christianity of Christ. Therefore, I hate the corrupt, slaveholding, women whipping, cradle plundering, impartial and hypocritical Christianity of this land. He recognized the real from the fake. Harriet Tubman, who was a committed Christian, stated that this was her prayer for her slave master. "O Lord, convert old master. O dear Lord, change that man's heart and make him a Christian."
The reality is that Christianity is based upon the central figure of Jesus Christ. The gospel is the person and work of Jesus Christ. And to be honest, we don't examine him. We make our assumptions about Christianity based off what you heard. I love how the Sermon on the Mount just mentioned the Bible, but Jesus is funny to me because Jesus says this all throughout. He says, "You have heard, but I say." What have you heard? I can hear all kind of stuff, but what does Jesus say? I live in a city, St. Louis, that there's a church on every corner. Some blocks is 2 or 3 churches. And this is the reality. You can purchase a building, get a name, put a sign on there, and say it's a church. And that does not necessarily mean that that is an authentic or correct representation of what the Christian faith is. And so if you want to know what is authentic Christianity, examine the person of Jesus Christ as revealed in the scriptures, not a book written by somebody who didn't live 2,000 years ago and say, gee, but the authentic Jesus as historically portrayed, which is historically accurate, not just a spiritual book, historically accurate account of Jesus, the man who lived. Even those who are historians and those who are not of the faith can say that is a historically accurate book, and that is the person of Jesus Christ, and we must examine him if we're going to examine or make an affirmation or a rejection of the Christian faith. Name is Kenny Petty. At this point in my life, I am a pastor of the Gates Church.
Of all the Old Testament pages, the last Adam and the son of David, the reigning king, the suffering servant and the light to the nations, the final priest, who perfectly overcame all of his temptations, the firstborn from the dead and fruit of the new creation, ultimate prophet. I hear that you live by the law. You are? Just know when you're dropping the ball, you gon' sin, okay? The Yahweh is not letting you off. Your sin, cause if you break one, then you've broken them all. And all your sacrifices will never suffice. Cause Yahweh only accepts perfection in life. So by this standard, Jesus is the true Israel. And the people of Yahweh are united to Christ. Grace.
I do not want to gloss over the fact that there were real injustices that happened to our ancestors in the name of Christianity. But like our ancestors, we must recognize the real from the fake. We must not listen to what everybody tells us. We must not accept the slave mentality of what we can do and what we can't do because of the color of our skin or even culture. YouTube cannot be our only source of information. We need to go to libraries. We need to study. We need to get degrees. But more importantly, we need to reach our community and make it better. We don't need to spend so much time on conspiracy theories, but we need to spend more time making our community better. If we do this, we don't have to look to the past to be proud of our heritage. We can come into our communities and be proud of what they are and be proud of who we are. Everywhere Christ went, he changed things. We can do the same thing if we allow him to change us first.
A Catholic man holds his rosary. Islam holds the Quran. While dudes on the streets trying to hold on to time. While Buddhists look for peace, Hindus and Sikhs. The truth is absolute, that's why I hold on to mine. A Catholic man holds his rosary. Islam holds the Quran. While dudes on the streets trying to